Legacy media had a meltdown following the Supreme Court's ruling that Donald Trump is eligible to run for president, nixing the Colorado Supreme Court's earlier decision that tried to block him from being on the ballot. Let's take a look.
I will be shocked if Donald Trump doesn't, as soon as he can, get out there and argue not only that the Supreme Court is behind him, but he's probably going to argue, even though there's nothing in here that specifically says, as Ellie so importantly pointed out, anything about what happened on January 6th. It's just procedural about whether the states or Congress have a right. He will claim victory, and I'm guessing he will do it in a more broad way than this decision.
My larger reaction is disappointment. I do believe that states should be able, under our Constitution, to bar oath-breaking insurrectionists. And ultimately, this decision leaves open the door for Congress to act to pass authorizing legislation. But we know that Congress is a nearly non-functioning body. So ultimately, it will be up to the American voters to save our democracy in November.
Conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett sided with liberal justices but did not join their opinion, writing her own instead, saying this suit was brought by Colorado voters under state law in state court. It does not require us to address the complicated question whether federal legislation is the exclusive vehicle through which Section 3 can be enforced. Particularly in this circumstance, writings on the court should turn the national temperature down, not up. So this was the big point of distinction, obviously, between the majority five-person aspect of and then the concurrence that was written by the liberal justices and then separately by Amy Coney Barrett. The question is whether or not the decision was overly broad insofar as it foreclosed the possibility of excluding a president that was found to have been an insurrectionist from the ballot except via legislation. So that's a little bit hard to maybe wrap your mind around. How else would it happen? Well, imagine a world where there were a trial, for instance. Trump was actually convicted of doing an insurrection, and some laws are self-executing. So Congress, the president could say, okay, well, on the face of it, he's an insurrectionist, just like on the face of it, a candidate may or may not be 35 and eligible, and therefore they cannot run, they cannot be on the ballot. But what the majority is saying here is that unless Congress, which is a divided Congress to the point of that pundit there, unless they are able to pass legislation that says this guy or woman can't be on the ballot, it's a no-go, which does really limit the possibilities that someone, even if there were national consensus around someone having violated the law in a way that made them ineligible, could actually be barred from the ballot.
Sure. And look, I think it's fair to debate that part of the ruling. But again, there's no on the actual Trump is cleared to be on the ballot. There was no dissent whatsoever. They all agreed. Mm-hmm. And I'm just struck by these, including that's the Colorado official, Jenna Griswold, the Colorado Secretary of State, whose reaction there, I think, tells you so much. He's like, well, now I guess it's up to the American voters to save our democracy. I'm like, that's yes, in fact, we let the people decide. That's the whole thing. That's the whole ball of wax. And there's something so weird about, like, the chief election official in the state begrudgingly conceding that they have to go to plan B, which is to let the people actually vote. In terms of what the CNN talking heads were saying, that this is going to allow Trump to claim some greater victory over the January 6th narrative, I don't know whether that's true or not. But again, then the people who tried to take him off the ballot put us in that position by giving him a win. And I'm sorry, people deluded themselves. I'm thinking of all of the columnists, even legal analysts who said this is a really strong case, and we don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do. It was 9-0. 9-0.
Well, wait a minute. It might have, in the abstract, nameless pundit's defense, or legal analyst's defense, I actually didn't see a lot of that. I saw pretty consistently people predicting that this was going to be the outcome, regardless of whether or not they liked that
David
outcome.
French, who I otherwise like, conservative columnist at the New York Times, he said he thought it was a very strong case, thinking of never Trump, George Conway type people. who are all over CNN. Eli Koenig didn't say
I didn't see Ellie Mistel, none of the liberal commentators, even I listened to the Pod Save America episode on this morning. The only quibble that people are having is the idea that the conservative majority may have precluded the possibility of judicial enforcement if a president were to be found to be an insurrectionist. I do see some frustration over that, and I don't think that's misplaced frustration. Again, there are many circumstances in which you would trial a case in law and expect there to be, because of the outcome in a court of law, judicial enforcement of that outcome without Congress having to say, all right, Robby, you won your fender bender suit, but you can't get paid unless Congress passes a law to say Robby Soave gets his insurance payout or whatever it is. Do you see how that is adding a kind of an artificial hurdle here that is not demanded by Article 3 of the Constitution? So I think we should really separate out what people are upset about. And if people are upset about that, so be it.
Yeah.
But really, honestly, I do think that this is, to the extent that there's any controversy around this or surprise about this, it's not being manufactured by legal experts. It's being manufactured by, if anything, partisans and the media who want there to be a bigger story here than there ever was going to be.
I guess I should clarify. I saw a lot of this kind of wish casting, this fantasy from your never Trump type who populate CNN and MSNBC and social media and who were like, this is the thing. Yeah. And maybe that's cynical and they knew it wasn't, and that's just how they stay relevant and how they fundraise.
They're selling hope. Yeah. Which is a dangerous thing. And look, I do think there's a really interesting question about what was going on in Colorado and Maine for anybody to think that these were going to be viable cases that also, from a strategic perspective, reflected well on the Democratic Party, who, again, is trying to make this argument that they are the pro-democracy party, that they are the ones that want the people to decide. And I think you're right to discern some frustration that, oh, gosh darn, the people are going to have to pull this one out for us one way or the other. Because when the people decide, you have to be attendant to the fact that they're frustrated about high cost of living, that they're frustrated that certain promises weren't fulfilled by the Biden administration. They're frustrated about foreign policy in Israel, Gaza, and on down the line. And when you hear people like Chuck Schumer, who has, famously said, for every working class vote we lose, we pick up an upper middle class person in Connecticut, or I'm paraphrasing here. That's the kind of frustration with the interest, whims, demands of working class voters that you see across the political spectrum. And why, frankly, there is so much attention paid to voters as opposed to getting new voters to turn out, people who they know have voted before, not just because of the ease of voting, but because there's a class of voters that is more aligned ideologically with what Washington wants. And when you start expanding the tent, then suddenly you have to pay attention to the fact that polls show that majorities of Democratic voters, almost majorities, about half of Republican voters want things like Medicare for all, want things like stopping endless war, want things like raising the minimum wage, want things like wealth taxes on the rich, which we know are never going to get anywhere in Congress.
I should mention another category of people who speak on cable news who are very supportive of the Colorado decision and maybe not necessarily predicting SCOTUS to going that way, but saying that Colorado had made the right decision, were many Democratic lawmakers, including Adam Schiff, running now for the Senate seat for Dianne Feinstein's very vocal on that. Ted Lieu, Pramila Jayapal, basically down the line, maybe not literally all of them, but there were a lot of high-profile Democrats who thought that was I guess thought rhetorically that was the right strategy, but here we are. It has not. I don't think it has advantaged the Biden campaign whatsoever.
I don't think it's really hurt them in a meaningful way. And we'll still see, remember we talked about this yesterday, is the strategy to give the Supreme Court an opportunity to say, I'm going to give one of these cases to the Democrats and one of these cases to the Republicans. Yeah. This is the Republican gimme, arguably, rhetorically, and the Democrats are going to be the ones that are successful when Donald Trump's immunity case fails.
And I hope they are successful, not because I'm a Democrat, but because we must limit presidential executive authority. We must make the office of the presidency accountable to the normal due process. More Rising right after this.